Welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is another episode of Dance Experts, and I really have a lot of expertise on the table for you today because it's going to be a mixture of movement. We're going to actually be talking about fighting. We're going to talk about movement as it relates to dance, of course, because that's what we're here for as well. But I think Saeed's perspective today is going to give us so much more to think about, and really a depth of how we can think about our movement, how we can think about our own resilience as human beings. So I'm going to let him introduce himself. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm delighted to be here on digitally, and thank you for inviting me, truly, because, you know, as an artist, you're always looking for a chance to express yourself. And that's sometimes, you know, in the world gets mixed up as so-called narcissism, you know, but it's completely different world. Artists trying to express itself, you know, trying to bring out what's inside of them. And what is inside of me? Well, there is dancing, because I danced 27 years with the Floor Technicians and UK jazz dance. It is influenced by 1920s or 30s, 40s tap dances, you know, the Hoofers. And it's very jazz. And jazz, as you know, we could talk about, is very expansive. And we could go towards, so that's the dancing side of it. My brother was a dancer, so I looked up to him and I became a dancer. That was a journey of the dance. Then it was my father. I was born into Olympic wrestling family, fourth generation wrestlers, but is connected to Iran's literature, history, Persians. Ferdowsi, one of our biggest poets, the two main characters are wrestlers. But fundamentally, they are movements. We can talk about that a little bit later. So we got two pillars here. So we got the wrestling, we got the dancing side of it, as well as my uncle was an academic. So I got three people that kind of followed their footsteps in that sense. So I'm doing research. I'm a researcher. Resilience plus a state of flow in athletic performance. So that's where the psychology comes in. So if I can summarize that in one example, people may see what I do. I work with athletes and non-athletes. But for example, if one of my athletes working towards the Olympics, you know, he wants to bring his gold medal back. Two key aspects of my specialty in terms of wrestling is the psychology. You know, it could be just anxiety, external voices with the crowd, the light, all those type of things. He wants to become in a state of flow. So barriers to the state of flow is one of the things I do. And I do fine tuning with the techniques where dancing really comes into it. So it gets very interesting especially for people, they haven't got the both world. So in many senses, I've got three glasses on. That's where the complexity comes in. And I do look at a lot of things in the more Gestalt sort of psychology as a whole, you know, sort of puzzles when they come together suddenly make sense. And you see the athletes that could be particularly good at movement, but psychological aspect of it, something is just missing. It becomes a barrier for them to reach their full potential. I look for flourishing full potential of my athletes, my friends, body, mind, community is Wrestle for Humanity, which is my social project. That kind of sums up my life rather than what I do. I am my project. Amazing. I am my teaching, you know, and of course, initially when you tell your whole life in a very short period of time, people go, wow. But, you know, you start asking them questions, they go, oh, I'm same. There are many aspects of our lives, you know, and I guess because I'm a jazz dancer, I look at the world in a framework of thinking of jazz. And, you know, then you see every sound has to be heard to make that big harmony. And that harmony is that flourishing, if we can, you know, at times of moments achieve it, then it's wonderful at that moment, you know, state of flow is there then.
Yeah. I mean, this is why I was so excited to have this conversation, because I know you have, so many different perspectives to bring to movement and also just being a human being in general. Yes. So maybe let's start with this idea of flow then, because we've mentioned it and people might be thinking, well, of course, this doesn't just apply to athletes, it applies to dancers. Whether or not you want to classify yourself as an athlete, as a dancer is up to you. But I think that we can all, I mean, regardless even of whether you're a dancer or an athlete, but just as human beings, benefit from an understanding of what is flow? How could I potentially access it? And then, as you talked about these kind of barriers to entry into flow, what some of them might be for some of us. Can we go here first? Because I think it's going to be really interesting for people.
Absolutely, it's a conversation. And as initially when you said to me, thank you for being on the program with you, is because you left it initially free, the part one, I believe in the collision. So Natalie and Saeed are talking, what happens in between really matters for me. And I'm not refuting the fact we got one side and we got the other side, but when we collide together, what happens to me? Now we can look at that from a perspective of tango. And historically, we do know it was a duel, they were hiding lives behind, and, that's the history of it. Then we can look at it as wrestling. So we're pushing each other off balance. Is a disagreeable dance. And we're like, get off me, Natalie. I want to keep my balance. So in that aspect, so there. Now, in terms of wrestling, if we're talking specifically, I'm trying to do a move, and we're talking about a state of flow. But I think, before we jump into wrestling, to dancing, we can describe it very easily. Have you ever had a moment, you're watching a movie, maybe your dear husband, your partner, calling you, Natalie, and he's like, you just can't hear nothing. The time, outside world kind of stops. We've experienced that, and I don't know, because I'm more describing rather than specifically explaining. Reason being, some of these things are felt-based stuff, and that dancers really know that. And in terms of intellectual so-called world, the body's been dismissed in that sense,
Yeah.
But I'm feeling something. It's not meant to describe. It's a bit like jazz. I think Louis Armstrong said, if you try to describe jazz, if you try to get an answer what it is, you're never going to get an answer because you're meant to feel it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Optimal engagement with the TV. Natalie's calling me, Saeed, we got to get on the podcast. Outside is kind of stopped. I'm so deeply engaged, so external world stops. Time kind of changes, So maybe I shouldn't go too much into it because it might mess up the conversation here, but there are about 7 to 8 elements we can look at it, but there is one very, I call it cool, because I like it. Autotelic, they call it, autotelic personality. Do you know what that is, Natalie?
Tell me. No, I've heard the word and I couldn't tell you right now.
But I guess described with the work of Csikszentmihalyi, so-called godfather of the flow, we got described with the West. And autotelic personality, the means and ends, it's just there and then. You get your reward there and then. It's very intrinsic.
Yes. Okay.
Do you understand?
Yeah. So we're not so outcome focused. It's more in the process, being present to and focused on the moment. Something like that.
Yeah. And you're in here and now. It just happens. He's a being, And I got a term in my teachings whenever I'm teaching, say, wrestlers or athletes, different types. I work with boxers sometimes. They say, I'll try, coach. I said, well, trying is lying.
Mm-hmm.
Trying, like over trying also.
Yeah.
It's a bit like initially when you try to get on a bicycle, you try to concentrate, trying to understand the stuff going on. You're still in a state of like bringing all the information in. Once it's in our body, you get on a bike and go.
Yeah.
And it's different. There's different types of focuses, and I totally get that. But I'm just talking about the dance, but I just dance. When the music comes in, if I get tuned in, but before I'm looking, who's watching? Some people like to have a little drink, which I don't have a need for. I just start tuning in when the tuning starts going. And I think jazz is very interesting in that sense. You know why? Because you have to surrender yourself to the music, then you become the music. And that is the description of the flow. You become the music. You're part of it. You're part of it.
This is a very interesting concept because I feel like really most dance styles, that is ultimately partly what it's going for. I mean, obviously I can't speak for all dance styles, but I think that there is something special about jazz that ballet doesn't have, which I feel like ballet really creates because of the type of training and the way it's taught, and maybe something about the perfectionism that tends to come up within ballet, is that even though ballet dancers would say the same thing, I'm aiming to become one with the music, there are actually so many barriers because of this idea that it has to be exactly a certain way, the technique has to be exactly right, that all these things, where I'm really interested to hear from you in terms of, for jazz. Actually, let me just say this for a second on the thing of flow, because then I want to ask you about jazz. But for me, flow happens a little bit after I have a bit more mastery of the technique. So I've never really been able to get into flow states immediately when I'm a beginner at something. I can certainly be really enjoying it, but I haven't had those moments of when I'm really feeling just completely at one with what I'm doing, and like time is a different concept. But I've had it in orchestras, especially as I became a teenager, and I've had it dancing as well. But for me, there was like an element of mastery there. So I'm really interested from a jazz perspective, because there is such a different approach to it, I feel like, in terms of the liberation of the dancer, like the empowerment of the dancer, compared to ballet, which can be very strict and sometimes too rigid to allow for flow states to arise. So sometimes I feel like that's a shame. But what do you think?
You had, Natalie? Is that the experience you had?
Yes, it was. It's until I was able to be doing it for me. Like there was a time when I was still doing it for approval, and there was a time when I was doing it for performance. And I was, but in the moments after that, when I had, you know, my technique was good and I was dancing more for me. Yeah, certainly there was moments. I mean, some of the ways that I know that I'm really in that is like when you're doing an exercise or a variation or whatever it is, and then I get the goosebumps and I just feel like, oh yeah, I'm totally in this right now. And then I feel, oh, I'm one with the music. So yeah. I've had access to it in many other dance styles, but ballet was a little bit harder to access it. And I was like, that's interesting, because I've spent so many hours in ballet now and I'm still not being able to access it regularly. And that was one of the things. I think I just had these blockages of what it was looking like from the outside. So I wasn't in the present moment. I was in the reflection in the mirror, and I was in what's the teacher thinking, and I was in all these other kind of concepts. Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's, you know, as I said, I'm interested in Natalie's internality. What is she experiencing when I'm coaching? So for example, if you and I were working together and you're working on a little micro movement of a technique, it was very, very small. You just got to get your shoulder passing this little movement of the other shoulder for me to get a position to lock that leg. And he wants to turn. As we're doing it, we suddenly lose ourselves to the flow of the information and exchange. And it's not a hard collision, is it? Because our mind are kind of tuning in together. So there's kind of a interpersonal flow going on between us. At that moment, I am with my students. We've tuned kind of together. I see it in that way because I'm also not just going to go with what Csikszentmihalyi says. He's a profound teacher, but also is about the personal experience, what's happening inside of me.
Yeah.
So that's quite interesting, because, and I get it, because sometimes the teacher's on top of you. I come sometimes when I see students, for a reason I do that. Then I gradually bring myself out. Because they really got to know, I don't know, you're the master, you have to tell me. They are thinking very categorically.
Yeah.
That's very quantity-based type of research, even if you're researching it. I'm looking at it from a qualitative type of a research, or we should say experience, what's happening inside of me. And dance, for me, it is an experience. Wrestling is a somatic experience. And I said soma in a sense of sensory of the body. I'm sensing this. And you mentioned a very good word here for me, and I don't want to sound like an authority, by the way, because I'm just describing here, and I genuinely believe in that, you know. But you know, when I'm sensing this, what you said about mastery, when I've reached the mastery, when the guy is turning over my shoulder, my body tells me that's ready for a shoulder throw. He was in front of me, the face is there. Well, okay, let's do it this way. So the face is there. So, by the way, this is my that's there. So I work myself around to this position. I pass his arm, but he grabs my arm now. Then he does the shoulder throw. Or maybe I should say it better. I do the shoulder throw. I feel that position is there. But at that moment, because this speed's happening, I haven't got time to think.
Yeah.
My body does it for me.
Yeah.
So I got a term, let it happen. Let it come, let it go, allow it to flow. But that's more to do with the psychology of it. But you can tiny bit borrow the idea of it at least. You say, well, let it come, boom, coming up. Of course, initially we got to practice. And you know what happens with some of my students? They're trying to get it perfect, what you just said. They're trying again. That's the reason I come a little bit heavy with them. At that point, I become very coach-centered. And I'm doing it purposely, see what the reaction is. Can I get him to really liberate himself to the sounds of the jazz, to the feeling. Now let's switch to the feeling, liberate myself to the feeling of this technique, keep doing it. Then the body teaches me, the body teaches my student, not Saeed. Saeed is an external person. They're the people in the river. They can't see themselves. They need a coach from outside.
Yeah.
I am putting in a poetic language. I am putting in a philosophical way, but some things cannot be described.
Yeah.
And they're not meant to be described. We trying so hard to really force and put into categories. Well, this is more of the experience and it's more expansive, like jazz is philosophy of process. Bergson spoke about that, you know. He talked about the live time. He devised, I think, if I can remember it correctly, because that just popped up in my mind, about objective time and live time. Live time is your experiences. Now have a look at this. Someone says, like Mike Tyson, he's done so much boxing throughout the years, and he's been through such a tremendous experiences of life. Not many people can do that. He's got a tragic story about a child, just the connection with his mother, you know, the type of job she was doing, and progressively he went to the boxing world and learned boxing. With Customato, he channeled his emotions there. He showed us the profound way of type of boxing, you know, pickable style that he does. And Tyson's been through all these type of things. We really got to embrace just watching him and celebrate what's going on there without the judgment of a good or bad, to really understand. Do you understand? Because we put Tyson in the categories. Well, at this point, let me just watch first what's going on and listen to him what's going on. And this is, I think, part of the problem sometimes with coaching. And I want to indicate this. I am not talking about when the coach fundamental language of the art they try to teach. That process is needed. That then you work yourself towards mastery. I'm trying to come back to your word. You use the word mastery. Have a look at the conversation then. I forgot, if we set that as a language, then we got the alphabet going on. Through the alphabet, we learn to make a sentence. Through the sentence, we got a paragraph. Through the paragraph, we can write a chapter. Chapters becomes a book, perhaps becomes volumes. Okay, we got those type of books that is going on. It reaches a stage, you can play around with the words. We can call that maybe poetry. And mastery, you've been there so long, you can improvise. This is why when we listen to jazz, because it's based on improvisation, you surrender yourself to the tunes. Every sound has to be heard. There's different direction. Pa 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 pa. That's agreeable at the moment. Suddenly someone comes with a saxophone, changes his direction, and you can start following it. It's overwhelming for people to start following. Then you sit back, then you get it. Does that make sense? So in the flow, in that terms, you know, it takes time sometimes. But that's frustration, tolerance kicks in. Then it's like, oh, I don't like this. People finding just today's world in particular, because there's so many notifications coming out of life, is abundance of information. Well, sometimes let it come, let it go, allow it to flow. I don't need to. If I want to engage myself, then I come here. Then I meditate sort of here.
Yeah.
There is a lot of information here, you know?
Yeah, there's so much in what you just said. I mean, we could talk about what you've just said for the rest of the hour, but I want to pull out two things. The second of which is going to be improvisation, because I think this is a fascinating topic. And I think our relationship to allowing ourselves to improvise, or trusting ourselves to improvise, or giving ourselves permission to improvise, can say a lot for how our relationship with life actually. So I'd love to come back to that. But you also said something very interesting in regards to flow, which I hadn't thought of it in these terms before, but there's something about flow that's about connectedness. Because I think sometimes, because we live sometimes in quite individualistic ways, and we think quite individualistic sometimes, and I do that as much as anyone else, but that the idea of flow is like, oh, it's a me experience, it's all about me, like I'm having this thing and it's all inside me and the mastery is in me and it's me. But then when you said, you know, about how with the student or in the middle of a fight, it's about the connection. And when I'm thinking now, really any of those states of flows that I described before, it's all about connection. It's connection with, like in orchestra, that's the easiest one, is connection with all the other players that I'm playing with and connection with the notes in the music. Same thing with the dance, like it's about the connection to the music, which was originally performed by a human being, even if they're not there in that moment because it's a recording. So it's still always about connection. And then, you know, because I dance salsa and bachata as well, any of those movements is always about connection between two people. So that's something that I hadn't put two and two together before until you said that, but it makes a lot of sense, this idea of flow being related to connection, and perhaps, you know, great artists are connecting to something else beyond themselves in those moments of flow. I don't know, I'm guessing that. What's your experience? I would love to know, like, what's your personal experience of flow in any of the categories of many things that you are a master in already?
When I experience myself at my best, you know, and I often get that at home. So if I'm coming down, my brother lives with me, you know, sometimes I come downstairs when she's, you know, playing a tune in the background is Iranian music. I find myself dancing because I dance a lot of Iranian as well. That's kind of, I can explain that afterwards. And emotions are very different in terms of the Eastern. And there are studies, you know, but that's another conversation. When I find myself, you know, in my best, I'm just experience life to moving, specifically to dance. Often I'm just not thinking, it just happens. I hear the music and my body starts going like this. But here, you look at the, you know, baby born, you know, we're born with rhythm, right? So we can experience the rhythm. So we move in the babies, they're going like, I find myself that way. My shoulders starts going, I'm going, then I put in a little sequences there and I stop. You know, I like stopping within the music because again, I'm tuning in.
Mm-hmm.
You can also see that in a sort of psychology. When we don't like something, our nervous system gets switched on. You know, we sat down, immobilizing with fear, but we can immobilize without the fear.
Yeah.
Now, but again, that's going towards psychology. But, you know, tuning in, tuning out is one aspect of life. You get it with trauma, tuning it out.
Yeah.
With flow, you tuning in, you know, and I get lost in my music.
Yeah.
With wrestling, it's an opposite world because it's very stoic. You're actually dealing with the load. It's pain-based. So can you see the differentiation of dance with the joy?
Yeah.
But before going on a stage, sometimes you're like, whoa, I'm nervous, I'm feeling a butterfly. Do you understand? But that actual butterfly, you can celebrate it because it's switched on for you to move. The interpretation of it is very crucial here for us to understand. You know, is this butterfly feeling bad or good before a fight? Is absolutely necessary for a boxer. I don't see, let me just signpost this. I don't see wrestling as fighting. I see as playing. Because we don't fight.
Okay, that's a really
we don't choke. So it's not about killing. It's about controlling the movement of your opponent. He wants to dance. I'm like, no, you're not dancing. I'm going to shut you down. So even with the double leg attack, the ones that really, they call it the blast double leg attack. There's a profound wrestler who made this famous called Jordan Barra. And Jordan got a profound double leg attack, but he's still taking you off your feet.
Okay.
You lose your balance suddenly. So you're like, you're not dancing, but he wants to do it instantly. He's more into revolution. But he moves in a space, he's improvising, you're coming and going, improvisation kicks in, you know? Then he's got a very go-to move. He snaps you down. When you're on the floor, he comes towards you because he really is a blast double. Most people want to get out of his way. Then he hits you with a double. He scores his point because wrestling, you score when you go to the floor. Okay, it's a takedown.
Yeah.
So what is my job as my defense, first of all? Is the art of not going down. I'm maintaining my balance. Well, balance is sat with ballet. You posture up, you gesture up, you know, to be able to get your turn. You're turning. We do that in wrestling. We actually do the same biomechanics.
Yeah.
You understand? And if I'm distracted from outside, something is taking my attention away, well, I'm never going to be able to tune in.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
becomes
Wow.
difficult. It's a barrier to the state of flow. And if you notice, I'm talking about a lot of barriers to this because that's my expertise. And I'm not going to go anywhere else because that's where I'm alive and I seem to be good at it. We talked about intellectual property, taking it from each other. Well, my creativity sat here. I'm engaged with it. I can see those type of things, and I'm going to places no one else has been there. It's just Saeed. And that's why I believe in the creative side of it. Then I will organize it afterwards, which is a part 2.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because maybe people who have, like, for example, I've never done wrestling or any martial arts, or I mean, I'm fascinated by it, and I think I probably should at some point. I have a friend who does Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and she's always raving about how great it is. But from the outside, this idea of, oh, it's actually about taking someone out of their balance, or the amount of creativity and I don't know if you would say improvisation. I guess improvisation that goes into it as well. It's just something that I wouldn't have thought about because, in my head, it's like categorized as sport or competition. So that's in its own box. But now the more that you're talking about it, I see how many connections there are with dance. So I'd love to hear from your experiences having both expertise, what in dance helped you in wrestling and what in wrestling helped you in dance, or for your students or whoever. Like, I'm really curious about the bridge there.
I think, first of all, I got a uniquely different approach to wrestling. And perhaps that comes from, I danced for years. And I feel like my coaches, a lot of my coaches, they were profound coaches. They taught me a lot about wrestling, but they couldn't put me in a category. And perhaps it's because I have got that expressive, artistic, dance is sort of not to say dances because you can be categorical. And I understand part of my study initially, I did study, the engineering as well. So I understand maths, so I can feel it. So that's why I got the 2 parts. But however, I feel very restricted when they put me in a category. And dance gives me a feel of freedom to move, freedom to fly. Yeah, with wrestling, I get you to fly. In dance, I do a jump. I get that feeling. I like the feeling of it. That's why I never ignore the feeling side of it. That's what I'm into. Antonio DiMaggio, neuroscientist, and our feelings and emotions that he studies. We are not thinking machines that we feel. We are feeling machines that we think. Antonio DiMaggio, a profound guy. You can look at his books, The Strange Order of Things. I think this was his last book. And wrestling is a feeling. And dancing is a feeling. And I've gone towards understanding human, what they experience in. I didn't want to restrict them to just say, it's just your behavior, it's just your environment. I wanted to see a little bit more, because when I'm talking to a client, when he's coming from Iran, he might see the world completely different. I have to be able to feel him. Do you understand? And I'm never going to be able to do that, but at least I'm opening up a door to be receptive. So I think, to answering to your question, it's all of them. They're not the differences. Rudimentary of it is that feel of freedom. And, with the correct boundaries, I always say that about, freedom and love is a very two complex, very hard subjects to really get in deep into it, But we got to understand, if we got a school outside, if I got a Ferrari and I've got certain type of mindset, maybe I had some accidents or like something, an influence in my mind. I really enjoy the speed, but I got a freedom to go not to 60. I mean, I'm not into cars heavily, but not to 60. Just say I'll go 120 miles an hour. If I got that freedom to go, I need to have boundaries of a certain type of speed. I'll take other people's freedom away. So we got to be careful. Really, have an inquiry-based mind. Have a receptive mind in the ears to be able to receive and sit with it first. That's why I initially expand the ideas, then I close them. And unfortunately, the pain I've got, as soon as I say about the expansion, because we live in a system is reductionist, they think I'm refuting the reductionism, and I'm not.
Yeah.
And some people might be against it. That's fine. But certainly Saeed is not refuting that. And I'm
Yeah.
just saying that initially, in terms of a therapy, I need to be able to hear the story.
Yeah.
Champion's mind is a form of a therapy or performance, what we're doing, but I need to listen to my student in a parallel, not authority first. Then if I feel like I know something, maybe I'll pass it on for us to become equal again, to meet each other.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah.
So I'm listening, I don't want to be like this. I want to be open to be able to connect. And that moment, and if it's something I've really not had any experience in, you know, that mastery you talked about, but that person, maybe he's got a mastery in a tragic.
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
Treasure, I don't know.
Yeah.
Have a look at me. People don't know how to look at the world from a perspective, Eastern perspective of Iran geographically. Maybe a region when the Mongolians came in, the broad type of tradition that when I speak about, as a Westerner or somewhere else, they don't understand me. We need to be able to talk first. And I think in our society, massively missing. So if we look at dance, if we look at wrestling in that sense, gives me the feel of freedom. Wrestling gives me a lot of pressure. I'm trying to get away to be able to dance, then I'll lock it down. So it gives me that resilience.
Yeah.
Right? The other side of it,
So much good stuff.
Yeah. So dancing gives me that freedom to be able to move, but at time I'll freeze the moment. I freeze, no moment, I say the space I'm in. You know, you look at, I mean, the audience's dances, you know, they know about Laban, sort of analysis, you know, the effort is there, isn't it? You know what I mean? The speed is there.
Yeah. This is fascinating. Like it was so, as you were speaking then, I was just feeling like getting filled up with like, I don't know, like happiness and gratitude towards you, because like the way that you see things and the way that you approach things is something that I've learned later in my life, but I realized what a valuable approach it is to everything, whether it's dance teaching, whether it's a romantic relationship, whether it's whatever, like that approach of let me see where we meet first and let me feel you rather than let me analyze you. I mean, it's a totally different thing. And then, like you said, yeah, but there are moments where you can be like, oh, this can be a teaching moment because there's something that I know that you don't know yet. So let me teach you this thing. And then we meet again here. Is so different to how in so many moments of my life, whether it was in mainstream education or whether it was in the ballet studio, it just felt completely different to that. And actually didn't even feel, it was just this thing of like, there's a hierarchy, do your bit and get on with it. And if it can work in wrestling, and if it can work in other dance styles, I'm so convinced that it can work in many domains of life, if not probably all of them, this approach to feeling each other on this somatic level and having an appreciation for, you know, what you said about mastery there as well was so beautiful, because mastery doesn't come with a certificate. Some forms of mastery might come with a certificate, but every single adult who's still here has mastered many elements of life, otherwise they wouldn't be here. And it's just the recognition of that is it's so profound and it's so beautiful. You keep mentioning this Eastern perspective and I'm so curious. I have to ask you, like, what do you see as this like some of the concepts maybe that have come from your Iranian background that have helped you navigate here, and where do you see there are places that we can bridge the gap here and learn, and like we can learn from that perspective? I'm so curious.
Yes. Natalie, let me just touch on some of the things you just said, then I'll speak about the journey of coming from Iran. And his historic, geographically, is a very important position, you know, in terms of history.
Yeah.
So we could talk about that, you know, and I like first of all, I called my psychology, infused movement, infused wrestling. And I've got a very infused life. And, you know, and sometimes it has to be multidisciplinary, but a lot of times you find me in a very interdisciplinary type of thing. As a whole, Gestalt makes sense. Let me come on that. You said a few things about, you know, the type of approach I got that you find in liberation. It makes you smile. What's alive in you is nice feeling for you. You know, the part one and part two we spoke about, my approach has got that initially expanded. Let me hear your story. Someone we can all, access to, go on to YouTube is Gabor Mate. He's got a beautiful word. He says,
Yeah.
what's wrong with you? What happened to you? And that is a summary of his work. You know why? Because it's inquiry based. He calls it a compassionate inquiry.
Yeah.
I need to have compassionate inquiry myself as a human, as a social, a being, to be able to connect. How do I not connect with you when I just totally shut myself down? Let me hear your story, Natalie. I think we live in a world of, so much self going on, and we need that. But as long as you agree with me, you're my friend. As soon as you disagree with me, I'm killing the other. Well, I'm here to kill myself in the initial bit by what Brené Brown and someone else people can access to. She says a beautiful words. You're having an open arms, wild heart, because I got a strong back.
Yeah.
I don't care if you have a donut, so-called is not good for you, is not going to affect my diet. But let me hear your story. Why are you having a donut? Again, I'm putting this language of poetry in there. Some of these things are very difficult to explain. Eric Fromm spoke about that, and he was a very rational type of a scholar. He spoke about the importance of a poetry, but why is it important? Some of these things, it needs a little bit of listening to the other. Do you understand? And by listening to the other, you disagree with me, it may come to a point of celebration for me, because you might kill a prejudice in me. At that moment, there's a death in me. Then I can liberate myself to come back forward and connect.
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
And I think that in our society, that's heavily missing. Heavily missing. Yeah. And Byung-Chul Han, another great philosopher, if you listen to him, whether you agree or disagree with him, just listening to him, he calls that an inferno of sameness. You have to be same. Well, what happened to the difference? It's called relationship, relating to.
Yeah.
I'm relating to your moves and I'm disagreeing. I'm in a game here. I don't care about winning and losing. I'm jumping in front. I want to be in a flow and a state of moment here to do this game of wrestling. Restrict me. You can't restrict me. I got moves. I'll move. My coach told me that. I even developed it to mine. Then I'm celebrating a body.
Yeah.
Do you understand? It's not just about beating up the body. As soon as I get beaten and going, sometimes it's needed. Sometimes it's necessity of life. I got no choice. I'm in circumstances, I'm going to have to survive. And that beautiful body helps me to do that. Body, mind, you want to put it in different categories. I don't care. I'm still here.
Yeah. This concept of being open to disagreement, and for that, to allow for that to coexist, was something that I only came to, honestly, a few years ago through the work of Africa Brooke. And I really had to challenge myself to deliberately listen to people that I disagree with, to do this exact exercise of, where can I still connect with this person? Like, where can I still sit and see from their perspective, even if I don't have to agree with it? And that, the exercise of doing that required probably even more discipline than like going into the dance studio, honestly. Like, it's a totally different kind of discipline to be able to, because I used to be so perfectionist, and I realize now the rigidity with which I used to approach life, and the rigidity of my beliefs, and of, climbing the academic ladder or whatever it was, that was actually my fragility. Like, I really thought, like, this is what makes me so smart, and this is what makes me be able to tell other people how it is or whatever. And then I realized that was absolutely my fragility, because if I can't relate to different people, and it's so ironic, because on the one hand, I've always been really good at that, and I live in Spain, so I had to learn, and I come from half Cypriot, half Scottish, so I've always had a bit of a mixture, so I've been good at kind of navigating that on one level. But then my mind, I think, was sabotaging what my body already knew on a body level of like how to just relate to other people, how to be with different stories, how to like appreciate different movements, different ways of being, different postures, different whatever, like all those things can coexist. But it was a threat to me until I gave myself permission to be misunderstood by people, basically. And I'm like, if someone misunderstands my story now, or who I am, or how I move in the world, or whatever I do, it's okay. Like, that's not a threat to my survival. They're not going to kill me necessarily. Hopefully not. But we can all coexist. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
You know, story, you mentioned that. I quite like the word story. We storytellers, we need stories. When it's uncertain, we shake, right? They call that liminal space. You know, it's like a trapeze. You'll have to let go. Now you're in the air. You don't know what's going on. Uncertainty kicks in. Then you have to go, but you got to have faith, right, to go there.
Yeah.
You know, and not having a story shakes people. But also listening to other people's stories, fantastic. Someone's got a scar on their face. I love that proverb or quote to say, "Do not touch my scar, because that's my story." You know, that's accepting a body, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, look at my nose. I got a very Iranian, Roman, whatever you call it. During the school, when I came from Iran, they want to pick on something.
Yeah.
Through a process of calling me big nose. Yeah. Luckily for that child, you know, Saeed coming from inside, in the shining years of a children of age of 13, you know, you're looking for that shine, you're looking to connect and stuff heavily. It didn't really truly believe, but it did change my self-esteem, because, you know, the story you're telling yourself.
Yeah. What kept you grounded? What kept you grounded? Was it in it? So like you said, it did affect, but there was something else that was holding you like more steady, because similar things happened to me, and it completely destroyed me, honestly. Like in a sense of like, I really hated myself, and I thought I was a monster, and I thought I was so ugly, and I couldn't understand in any moment why anyone could love me or be attracted to me. So, but there was something that was ungrounded for me. Like there wasn't a through line. And I'm curious for you, even if it shook it, what was it that connected? Was it like the connection to, well, this is where I'm from and I'm proud of it, or what was it?
It did affect it, you know, but I didn't totally go off. Inside, I knew I was okay. I was very lucky. Perhaps that comes from my dad, who comes from my mom. You know, I was loved at home. And they use the word, I want to be loved. And we live in some, you know, so much sadness sometimes. Some of our children, they don't experience that called love, you know. But there are always, as my cousin, recently I spoke to him, his name is Zolf. And I mean, he's got an unfortunate story at the moment, but one thing he did say was profound. He says, there's always a little bit of love here and there in our life. You know, my story, my dad was this type of a man. Wrestling is about wrestling back, you know, no matter what it is. And it's not about the strength wrestling. Our bodies are incredible. We know that from a world of MMA. The wrestler's body is just different. They push it to the fatigue. Well, because it's about load. But the actual fact is, we're trying to get away from the load. We're learning to get away from it. And I've seen my dad doing those type of things. I had little imprints. So I am privileged. I am privileged to having that wonderful dad. I've experienced war, I've experienced revolution, I've experienced a lot. I experienced being totally, on the last day before I come to England, we were in the streets. But I also experienced through that journey, so many people helped us. And don't forget, it was a drop. We were here, then dropped, then you have to come back. So that's a story of resilience. We're here now. What does it look like? Dr. Johnson speaks about that. Yeah. Do you understand? But there are beautiful moments there. I need to bring my attention there, because the brain, it looks after itself. You know, is it like that Teflon, when, trying to get that positive in, it's just not going in. But when it's negative, it's like a virus, instantly catches it. You know, trying to bring my attention, if someone's a spiritual practicing mindfulness, but we're talking about bodyfulness here, aren't we? You know, the senses, right? It's very different, but also very similar. Yeah. Reminding myself in there, because their story is, you think my nose is ugly. But now I've come to a point, many photographers, when I go to play, they want to take pictures from the side with me. They like it. And I've reached a stage now, I genuinely love my nose. Yeah. We've been told in the society, sometimes you're not meant to say self-celebrate. That gets mistaken for self-grandiosity. Yeah. Do you understand? 100%. It was you know, so I'm just said about the scar. I like my pain in the past now. I've managed to go back and kill Socrates, you know, unexamined life is not worth living. I went back bit by bit to start killing a lot of me. Yeah. To try to become as authentic as possible. I'm never going to get it. get there. But you know what? That itself is beautiful, because once you
Yeah.
complete, then it's done. Then it's
Yeah.
depressing.
Then what? Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, so we said about at the beginning of the talk, the philosophy of process is in between. That between is our story that matters. Because once I climbed the top of the mountain, my great friend Lee Camp, one of the most profound athletes in the world ever, you know, he says, when you reach the top, he only gives you permission to climb another mountain. But we can look at a very sort of a pain-based philosophy, you know, it's going to make me stronger, and you know, but also I say, well, this is my story. I'm gonna invite it in, let it come. So that's more acceptance commitment therapy as a branch of CBT. Now, I'm not just totally changing it. I'm also bringing mindfulness and accepting it.
Yeah.
You see what
This
I mean?
is,
There's two
yeah.
just, I don't know if I mean, I am expanding ideas, but that's also at the beginning of our talk, I expand the view for people to decide. Natalie, you decide what Saeed is. That's okay. You want to put me in the category, but maybe, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it depends on you. I'm not going to be authority for you to decide what Saeed is.
Yeah. So the word resilience came up there, and I feel like that was kind of the overarching theme of that, you know, everything that you just described. And I'm wondering if you've seen a pattern with the people that you've coached, with the athletes that you've worked with, the difference between those who are more resilient or those who need to work on their resilience, and what is the difference, and what does that process look like? And is it something you can guide them through, help them with, or is it something that people need to do with their own communities and their own lives? Like, how do you kind of conceptualize resilience?
Well, I think your question is very important from my perspective, because resilience is a very big umbrella. And one of the things we can look at, is becoming a buzzword. You know, when it becomes a buzzword, sometimes it loses its meaning. The meaning does matter here, you know, and that's where you could look at logotherapy. The people in Auschwitz prison, the people had a meaning towards their suffering, you know, which coexist within a realm of despair. They managed to know, but they managed to survive. I think that meaning in life is real important, but meaning itself, they could be an umbrella. And some people from their experience, well, what's the meaning of life? And we got to honor what they're saying. But what I'm saying is the gift of trauma. What is it? What happened there?
Yeah.
Example, my resilience towards my father. He did a lot of community work, but it's connected to my identity of Iranian. You're meant to give back to the society as a wrestler when you reach a certain standard.
Wow.
If I celebrate, I'm a champion now. I call it champion mind and his body, the Mercedes and the driver, right? And they have to work with each other. Well, you know, I'm giving back to society. I'm following his footsteps. Perhaps I'm finding some sort of meaning, or being with that, going along, I'm carrying his story. And I think through the process, I managed to get away from the shadow. I am Saeed. I am a son of Amir. Yeah. Because sometimes athletes really struggle when they got super dads, you know, because under the shadow. I want to celebrate his achievements of giving back to the society, which is the gold. What you do with the gold, the greatness comes is what you do with the gold. I've got to be able to celebrate without consumption. That's observing, listening, all those type of great things I could just watch. Meaning I'm not Amir. I don't want to be him because I'm myself. I'm authentically myself. I had to get that shadow off. But through that process of my dad, I managed to find that I had to go forward. I had to go, curious, they didn't have the answer, to have the courage, go and ask someone who's done the study. Go to a psychologist, you go to a coach. It's not a bad thing to do. Having the courage to go. I don't want to say it. You go in there. Through that process, you know, I've managed to kill myself so many times. Socrates would be very happy with Saeed. He said, Saeed, you did it. You know, because we will fall. And one great thing we said about wrestling, we constantly hit the floor. So continuously in the practice, we trying to stand up. And a lot of times we help each other up. Then we come to the hand in facing each other. then we go. Then we push ourselves down to get back up. I've got this idea of getting back up. I called it the wrestle back, but it's not about fighting. You know, I'm doing my best to dance in life. I like dancing, and it's a metaphor, it's an idea, it's a philosophy. So now I'm bringing art and science together. It's a philosophy for living, actually embodying it. So my rituals from Iranian wrestling, part of it was there. It managed a lot of different things, came together to help me to bounce back, bounce with, then bounce forward.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much good stuff there. I mean, first of all, the concept of gold being, you know, the importance is what you've done with the gold after you've achieved it. Like, it's so, that's so missing. That second part is so missing from our conversations about what success is. I feel like success is the gold itself, like whether it's the promotion or the car or the this thing or the that many followers or the book launch or the what New York Times bestseller, whatever it is. And that actually, no, the second half of that is, what do you do with that success? Like, that's equally, if not more important than the success itself. So I love that so much. It's really like making me think now, okay, like what is the point of all this? Like how much can I give back at the point where I feel, I don't know. Yeah, I'm going to have to deeply think on that one, because we can get so focused on like the gold thing. So I love that. And then second of all, the idea of getting back up, and the fact that when you are literally doing it with your body, like, this is not metaphorical anymore. This is not a psychological thing or an affirmation that says, when I fall down, I get back up, and like we repost it and we're like, yay, like let's be resilient. No, this is a literal embodied practice that when you are down and you're in pain and you might be scared, and I don't know what else could possibly be happening in that moment, but that you literally get up, and that you prove that to yourself. Like, I just keep coming back to in coaching, now that I'm bringing in more of the body every time into my coaching with my clients, I'm like, we actually need some evidence. We need some real lived evidence sometimes to make a bigger leap of faith, because otherwise we're like, oh, it's just a leap. But in the process of wrestling, and I think in some dance practices, but this is what I worry about, the dance practices that are so rigid and so fixed, and so you're not allowed to make mistakes, and just do it right the first time and don't fall down, because we don't want to have to see you fall, because that's ugly and we don't want to see it. But just any dance practices that allow mistakes and allow that process to unfold without piling on the shame and allowing people to just rise again, that is such a gift in so many ways. Because once you've had an embodied sense of like, I can get back up, like I've literally done it, I did it earlier today on the mat or whatever it is, and then be like, oh, so I can also do this when, you know, I get criticized on my YouTube channel or whatever it is. That's an example for me, but that I can do it in other realms as well, not only in life. So I love that, and I think it's really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, which is okay. People criticizing, that's okay, but that's your cinema, that's your story, that's what you want. Yeah. The book 4 Agreements, he really brings that alive, you know. And I think on the second book, 5th Agreement, talks about the cinema. That's your story, which is fine, you know. And I'm also okay for you to criticize me, you know. Walter said it the best, you know. I may disagree with you, but I stand to my death for you to have the freedom to tell me, you know, to be able to. That's okay. But in terms of my story, also is very valid. I need to be able to examine it. We talked about, you know, examined life not worth living, at least from my perspective. I wanted to do that. So I had, you know, stones in my bag. I want to allow it to be able to move as a dancer, but in life also, because sometimes it's not just getting up, it's getting back in a track of life. I see my philosophy, so-called the meaning of life. Saeed, what is the meaning of life? Or integrating and contributing. That's what I do. You know, I like to integrate people because I like socializing, you know, it's me. Why? Because I like to get to know people. That's what's alive with me. Someone else might not have that need. They just need to watch, they need to go back. You also got to love them.
Yeah.
Understand? He said, accept the difference and respect the difference by daily practice. And that's being kind. You're kind to yourself as well, because if the other way around, they got the power, they're not respecting you, they're not accepting your differences, then you're in trouble. It's a two-way street here. And that's where humanity connects. We get shared humanity, and we be able to see, the background of what's happened. And I'm not saying instantly accept, someone's done bad. We do know the outcome. It could be absolutely tragic, but there's also a story behind it. We'd be able to see a bigger picture a little bit. Do you see what I mean? Because individualizing the blame, that's a reduction of humanity in some senses. Do you know what I mean? Because I've been really suppressed in the background of me. Well, I got a little metaphor, I call it the garden. My students on the wrestling mat, they are the flowers. Now we got a garden there, and I'm the gardener. And there's a difference between a gardener and a carpenter, by the way. And there's a great book that people can, if they want, they can read that. Gardener, watches the flower, but doesn't do it like a carpenter.
Yeah.
You need the carpenter. I'm not saying that. Please, everyone listen to me. But we also need the sun. We also need the soil. We also need the water.
Yeah.
We need to have the knowledge how the body of the flower works.
Yeah.
And it's important because we came from flowers.
Literally.
Symbolically is important. Hence, philosophy behind our way of living is also important as a person. Quality of my life matters. Quantity of my life also matters. I'm okay with the material, but I also want to share it with other people. That's just me. If you want to argue about it, let's go. But you might give me a gift. I might be wrong through that connection. Do you see? That becomes interpersonal.
Yeah. Or I discover another truth, and that it doesn't even make me wrong, but that maybe it does. And maybe there's just two ways of seeing the same thing. The same as, I remember, I think I've talked about this before on a podcast episode, but I remember going into my first lecture in my master's for dance anthropology. And in the first lecture, she had a photo of the picture of the earth, but upside down. And she was like, what's wrong with this photo? And I was like, it's upside down. And she was like, well, what do you mean upside down? And I was racking my little brain to try and think of the actual physics of why that's wrong. And I was like, no, because gravity works all the way around, so it's not gravity. What is it? I can't fit. And then I was like, it's not. This is as correct as the one that we're just used to seeing all the time. And that, I remember in that moment, my life changed. It sounds such a silly small thing, but even just that, this ability. Yeah.
Theory of change. You change, you'll be able to see things in a
multiple perspectives.
Multiple perspectives.
Yeah. And that in itself is such a gift. I could honestly talk to you for 4 hours because we're so aligned, and I find it just amazing that we've come from such different walks of life, such different areas of expertise, and yet here we are. So much of what you've talked about today is resonant with my embodiment training, and yet yours comes from a different place. But it's so interesting because ultimately I feel like the deep resonances of the universal truths are somewhere there, and we can talk about them through different frameworks and different things. But thank you so much for sharing so much of that. My final question is I'm just wondering, what's exciting for you right now, or are there any projects that you're working on, or any research that you're doing, or any particular area of life that you're kind of excited about right now?
Should we share one Greek word, arte, excellence by moment, by moment, by moment. At this moment, I got a new student from USA, and he's got capacity to win an Olympic gold medal.
Wow.
He's got a small little barrier, which I'm not going to share specifically.
Sure.
We're going to, to the arena. He's going to have to go in, getting his ass kicked, and, having that vulnerability. But, it's exciting because I'm having lots of case studies of beautiful flowers. Sometimes people misunderstand them, or they misunderstand themselves. They just not experience the best of themselves.
Yeah.
Me, I'm far smaller than, anything in life. It's life so big, But, for me to be able to get, make life a better place by one person at a time, that excites me. At this moment is that, and through his story and other collective stories I've got, they become a case study saying, guys, I'm good at this. I can contribute this to you. That brings me alive also. And that moment, the interpersonal we talked about, that spark in between is the magic. So I'm looking forward to more sparks, and I just want to share as much as I can, because that moment I'm alive, Natalie, you know? You brought me alive here by inviting me here. Also, you feel like you're happy, you feel like you're ahead, you feel like you're not misunderstood. From my perspective, from seeing it from outside, you know, often people, anyone wants to dive in deep, when they want to share it, they're really scared of not just understanding, but more of being misunderstood. You see what I mean? And the coaching is not that difficulty, but that difficulty is its beauty. You know, I'm looking for more beautiful challenges to have the art of excellence by excellence, and just having that. So thank you.
I love that. Thank you so much. And I'm excited for your student, because he has an amazing coach. So it's probably going to be great success for him. If people want to follow your work, where's the best place? I mean, I follow you on Instagram, and can I just say, whenever you put, I mean, I love the wrestling content as well, but I'm not as versed in that. But when you posted, I think it was a jazz event that you were at maybe, and like, the footwork, I was just like, this is incredible. So if you follow Saeed, you're going to get lots of magical content. I really enjoy it. So but is there anywhere else as well that you'd like to?
So the main one is that platform, coach_Esmaeli, Esmaeli, Esmaeli. The reason I have not brought the 4 pillars of my work into website, because it's still in the state of the process. Now it's reaching itself to a very small place. We can put it together, we can interlink it, and that will be coming soon. So I will be announcing that on there for me to be able to connect with other people. And if people, you know, need any sort of a help in my sort of expertise, by all means, email me. You know, Saeed Esmaeli at gmail.com. Wrestle for Humanity is my social project. You can find me. Articles are actually more Wrestle for Humanity. So if you look online, Wrestle for Humanity, Saeed Esmaeli, that will come up. Because my work is body, mind, community. So yes, coach_Esmaeli or Wrestle for Humanity is the 2 places they can find me.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We'll make sure that we've got that linked in the description, so it's easy for people to find. Thank you so much. This has just been wonderful. Guys, I hope you enjoyed it. It's been a little bit different, but I think it's been really fun. We've gone, as you said, we've gone big, and we've gone focused as well, and I think that's really fun to do that process. So guys, let us know if you have comments, questions. As Saeed said, get in touch with him on Instagram if you want to. Obviously, you guys know you can always message me, and I will see you in the next episode of Dance Experts. Thank you for watching. Thank you.